In Harold Jacobs' textbook of elementary algebra in chapter 11, lesson 8, we're dealing with the idea of complex fractions. And first of all, let's look at what a complex fraction is. Let's look at this first thing I've got up here. This here is a complex fraction because there is a fraction over a fraction. So, if I could, I'm going to just make this like a big fat line just to emphasize. This is the one little fraction, and this is another little fraction, and this whole fraction is the numerator, and this whole fraction is the denominator. So it's complex because there's a fraction inside fractions. And by the way, it looks kind of complex. Now, if you remember anything back in the text, you should remember that this is the same as, coming over here, as A over B times D over C. What I've done is I flipped this around. And so now we have taken a complex fraction. And by the way, this is the one simple step that you're going to see in a lot of these, and many of these are going to come down to this kind of thing, is you get a fraction over a fraction, and once you get rid of all the stuff we'll talk about down here, that you've got no things adding, no fractions adding up here, and no fractions adding down here, you can just do this little flip over, and then so your answer here is AD divided by BC. Now you have a simple basic fraction because there's no fractions inside the fraction. That trick right there, you'll see. The other thing that we got to deal with in this chapter is, and I think we get overwhelmed when we see it, is this kind of fraction, which is almost the same thing, except notice the denominator down here. And when I say denominator, I mean the main denominator, that it has two fractions in it added, and oh my goodness, that just looks ugly. So what do you do with this? But don't get too caught up in this, because if I take just this piece alone, I think you know what to do with it. And just to prove my point, let's come over here and say, okay, if I gave you C over X minus D over 2x, could you do something with that? For instance, could you get a common denominator? Well, of course you could. You could say, well, if I multiply this one times 2 over 2, that's going to give me 2c over 2x, and that's that same denominator. So, okay, that's going to be 2c over 2x, and minus, whoops, that's a d, over 2x, I have a common denominator. So the answer is going to be 2c minus d over 2x. So what I just did, now it may not look a whole lot simpler, but it is, because now I have a 2x down here, and I'll show you what we're going to do with that. So what I did is I just solved this thing on its own. In other words, don't get caught up in it. Just deal with it where it's at. Do simple things. What I've just shown you is this AB is just AB. I wrote a slash notation. It's the same thing. And this, based upon what I did over here, became 2c minus d over 2x. Well, okay. That looks not much simpler. But actually it is, because now what I've got is an a over b, and let's just take this whole thing and treat it as something. This is like the c, and I don't want to confuse things, but just treat this as one number. In other words, now leave it alone as a unit. When you're moving things around in algebra, just leave everything alone as one big fat unit. Put this in a box, if you will. So I'm going to pretend that's a box. So what I can do now is, based upon this I did up here, I have a over b times, this is the denominator of the denominator. It comes up, so that's going to be 2x divided by, remember, keep this as a unit, divided by whatever the garbage is in here. We don't really even care what it is, because we'll deal with it later. So what I've just done, as you see, is I've taken what was a complex fraction, kind of ugly looking over here, and I dealt with this just by doing what we already knew how to do, get a common denominator. Then I did this step here of flipping it over, and you see it's no longer a complex fraction. There's no fractions inside of fractions. As a matter of fact, I know how to rewrite this. This is 2a times x over b times 2c minus d. And that is about as simple as I can get this thing. I mean, I could multiply that out, but it's about as simple as I can get this thing. Main thing that we're worried about in this particular chapter and this particular lesson is that we no longer have complex fraction. We have simplified it out of that form. And the 2 steps is knowing how to get from there, to there, that flipping, and then knowing when you've got something complicated with minus signs and everything down here, go after the common denominator, which we did over right there, and then get it into this form, and then do this step. So there's either one step, the flipping, or there's the common denominators and then the flipping. Hopefully this will help you out.